I'd like to welcome you all this morning to our Roth webinar series. We're going to give it a couple more minutes and let everyone join, and then we'll get started with our webinar on old data. Should it stay or should it go? I'd like to give you a few housekeeping notes before we start. As usual, if you've attended one of these webinars, you'll know that following the webinar, we send out an email with a copy of the deck in a PDF format, as well as a link to the video recording that you can go and watch whenever you like. I would just like to tell you that at the end of the webinar, we have time for Q&A. So when we get to that point in time, please be prepared. And if you have some questions, for our presenters, please put them in the chat and they will answer them when we get to that point. There's also a couple times throughout the webinar where we have some poll questions that we'd like you to answer. Participate in that because it helps give us a sense of where our audience is at in the industry. And additionally, at the end of the webinar, we have a brief survey that we ask you to take that helps us improve our webinars. So it is 12:02. Why don't we get started? I'm going to turn the webinar over to your presenters today, Aidan Townsend and Lindley Swanson. Over to you, Aidan.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Sorry. Today our webinar, we're going to talk about old data. And the pros and cons of using old data, whether or not you should do it, and some things sort of associated with that. So I'll pass over to Lindley. She'll go through the agenda with everyone, and then we'll get right into it.
Welcome, everyone. Aidan and I will introduce ourselves, then he will discuss what defines old data. Then I will continue the conversation defining the quality of your data or discussing what makes your data have good quality. And then I will discuss determining whether to use this data or which data in your capital planning. And then lastly, determine the best course of action for updating your data. Aidan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So we're just going to do some quick introductions. So hi, everyone. Aidan Townsend. I'm the practice lead for the data management service here at Roth IAMS. A vast array of experience dealing with both data as well as in a facilities department, managing projects, as well as working on condition assessments, capital planning, and everything associated with that. So.
And I'm Lindley Swanson. I have worked in post-secondary institutions for about 20 years. In the last 10 years, I've been more focused on deferred capital renewal and maintenance, prioritization schemes, and helping create capital plans.
So next we're going to do something we'll call setting the table. So we'll sort of go through a little bit about what data is and how data goes, and sort of define what we're going to talk about as we go. So in the world today, as we all know, we're inundated with lots of data. Sometimes it's really hard to determine what is real and what is accurate versus what data is made up, or what data comes from where. So in this particular case, as we refer to, facility asset management and data on the facility side, ISO 55000 has some pretty good definitions for us about what data actually is. So as we talk about documented information, it is the information required to be controlled or maintained by an organization and the medium on which it is contained. So in this case, whether it's paper copies of records, electronic records, however that is. And then as we dive into that a little bit more, information then is the meaningful result of organizing and processing your data, right? So again, we dig a little deeper. And what exactly is data? So data is facts about an object. So we take that again from ISO 9000, so a quality source. It's not just me telling you this. And then an object is anything perceivable or conceivable. So really, when we look at that, what is data? It's really information or facts organized in some particular method about anything that we can perceive or conceive. So it's a pretty broad definition, but it helps us define as we move forward what we're going to talk about next. So as we move through, defining what data is, the Institute of Asset Management defines data and information, saying that they should be managed within an asset management system to achieve both the asset management and organizational objectives. So Lindley's going to talk a little bit later about using data as part of a capital plan. There are some really good references about, how we should do that, how we should move forward. In this particular case here, the Institute of Asset Management states that, where it's not possible to achieve organizational data requirements, it's important that direction and guidance be provided. So an example of this is if in fact it's poor quality data, we need to make sure that people are informed on how reliable that data is and how much they can use and rely upon that data. Excuse me. So as we talk about what we would define as old data, I would say, anything that's older than 5 years, we would probably consider old data. There's a lot of things that happen across a 5-year plan, whether it be deterioration of assets or, work completed, etc. Well, as we talk about there, right? So any capital work that has been done on your buildings that isn't captured inside your data set. Inflation, for a lot of years, people didn't really pay too much attention to inflation. Over the past 5 years or so, I think that has really changed and people are paying more attention to inflation, whether it be, an annual globalized inflation rate or specific inflationary factors on particular sectors of the industry. Other things you want to consider: have there been major renovations since the last time you looked at your data set, right? So as we look at facilities in particular, have you done work that, again, sort of like point number 2, that hasn't necessarily been captured? The other thing we really want to consider is, as you look at your data, your data may not be wrong. So if you look at something and it doesn't look right, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It's just different from potentially what your current standards are or the current state of where you are in your asset plan. So keep that in mind. There's a definite difference between being, incorrect versus incomplete. So with that, I will pass over to Lindley, who has a poll question.
Oh, see the poll question. Oh, there. Are you
our poll
confident?
question, we're just asking if everyone, hopefully you should all be able to see it on your screen. How confident are you in the quality of your asset data currently? So we'll give everybody a few minutes to respond here.
Okay. Well, it looks like people, so I have my screen. Are you confident in the quality of your asset data? Most people are somewhat unsure of their data. Some are very confident in their data, and 11% are not confident in their quality of their data. So let's talk about the quality of your data. Good quality data should be current, maintained, accurate, and consistent. To get quality data, you'll want to understand different collection methods, different assessment collection methods, to be particular for this, talking about facility condition. So you have several options when you're dealing with assessment methods and data. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the least accurate. It's the fully modeled. So it's using building type to build out building elements. The costing is based on sources that are from standard databases, but the actual what's in your building and what's not in their building may not actually be captured in that model. The next method could be a hybrid model version, which is part modeled and part client informed modeling. So the client gives some input to provide a bit more accuracy to what elements might be in. They might have some specialty items, labs, or materials that are specific to that type of building. So that is slightly more accurate. Then we have a 5-year needs review, which is a partial facility condition assessment, but it's only looking for items that are related to your 5-year needs. So things that will need to be replaced within 5 years. The report that comes out of that is only those 5-year needs. Anything outside of that is not even looked at when an assessment happens. So you may have lots of items that have a longer life cycle. They're not going to look at those during those assessments. And then finally, you have a full facility condition assessment where every element in your asset is evaluated and assessed. This one is the most accurate for your data collection, where you also want to consider where the unit costs, unit measure, and expected useful life are sourced from. More quality, higher quality information will come from a consultant quote specific to a project. Those are often more to like BA class quotes. Those are more accurate, but also more costly. And on a regular basis, it's probably, we would recommend published cost guides providing Class D estimates to provide you with your unit cost, unit measure, expected useful lives. The least reliable is made up with no referenceable guides, but you can enhance some of your published Class D estimates with historic information based on your institution or experience and the people that you work with and their expertise. Further quality can be reviewed by verifying your sources, checking reputations, and then cross-referencing with other expert sources. And also own your data. Do quality assurance and quality checks to make sure that it's accurate, complete, consistent, and reliable. The last thing to make sure that your data is in the quality data that you'd like, you also need to make sure your data is maintained. Has your portfolio changed? Aidan kind of touched on this with old data. Have you updated the data? Have you acquired or divested any assets? Completed any major renovations? Are any of those things or all of those things need to be captured in your data so that in your planning and just for your reporting, you are complete with your data set.
I think one of the important things to remember here as you're looking at the quality of your data, I mean, Lindley sort of alluded to this, but if you are using published cost guides and you tweak costing for your local market or based on conditions that you're aware of, make sure you keep documented records of that. We've worked with many clients along the way that, we ask, well, where did this information come from? There's no record of where it came from or how it got there. It's just there. It's been there for many years, and that's what people use. So, we want to make sure that that, once you set a standard, that if there are changes to that standard that you're using, that you document them moving forward. So, sorry, back to you, Lindley.
That's okay. So determining whether or not to use your data in your capital plan. This is a big question, because there's you might be in the middle of assessments, you maybe are in the middle of strategic changes. So one of the big parts is whether to consider if you've reconciled all of your information. So are you still accounting for projects that you completed in the last few years? Are those things still in your data? Have you replaced an HVAC unit that is still in your data set, and so then is being used for reporting, but also maybe someone hasn't documented it, or a component of that replacement replaced a pump or something that hasn't been captured by the project or reconciled in your data. So often projects cover a lot of things. They make changes to a good portion of the component or elements that are related to your asset, and you may have not captured them all in your accounting or reconciling. This is also through maintenance. You might have maintenance that has gone in and replaced several things, removed asbestos, or that's not part of your capital, but those maintenance items should be documented as well. Then you have a quality and consistency of your data. So as discussed previously, what methodologies are you in the middle of switching between two assessment types or consultants? Have you changed how you're cataloging from different uniformat levels? Is everything all at the same uniformat 4 versus uniformat 2? And have you verified the sources that you have gotten your information from, and double checked and done a quality assurance yourself?
I'm just going to jump in here for a quick sec.
Yep.
As we talked about, the quality and consistency of your data, I would say, recently we've had a client where I give a pretty particular example. They had a previous assessment from, a few years ago, and had built a capital plan. There was a recommendation to do a repair on some domestic water piping. So that was in their plan. So as we talk about this, when I say in their plan and there's a recommendation, this is within their software. So definitely a trackable data point. It has a recommendation number. It's built into their plan. There's work orders against it. So it's not just, we need to do this and it's documented in an Excel spreadsheet or something. It is a trackable data point. So they had a recommendation to do a repair on some domestic water piping. That was from I think the recommendation was 2021. But they had it in their plan to do it in 2024. In 2023, the building was reassessed. And at the time, the assessor noticed that repair still needed to be done. So created a recommendation for a major repair to do that repair. So not knowing that the client had already accounted for that in their capital plan, they created this additional major repair. So what we end up with now in their assessment data is they have 2 repairs scheduled for, that single domestic water piping. So what happens is then, 2024 comes along, they complete the work, they do the repair, they close out that recommendation in the software, but there's still a recommendation in their database to do a repair based on an assessment that happened after the original assessment, but before the work was actually completed. So we discovered this, as part of our process. We look through data for clients and we discovered this. So then it's part of a conversation of, did you do the complete repair? Is there still an additional repair that needs to happen? So as we talk about the quality of your data and whether you use that in your capital plan, these are the types of things to consider as well. and if you are doing an additional condition assessment, which we'll talk about later, making sure the assessors are aware of, any existing recommendations or requirements that are already in plans to capture that information as they go through the assessment process.
Thanks, Aidan. Lastly, you want to double check your costing is accurate. Has inflation been implied every year, which Aidan kind of touched on, and has the costing been updated yearly using your costing published costing guides? And so it's important to reflect on all of these various completion of data, really, to know whether it's, to use it in your capital planning. We often had times where, as Aidan has said, something is in the plan and it doesn't get canceled out or completed as an action, or there's scope creep and that doesn't get caught. And so you want to make sure that those are, so that in the future years they're not included in your data, and they're actually accurately reflected for your future planning.
So with that, we have another poll question. So in this case, what we're asking is, do you currently have a 3 to 5 year capital plan? I guess it's a two-part question. And if you do, does it have updated data? So we'll give everybody a couple minutes to go through this.
It's exciting to watch these polls come in.
Okay, so it looks like we're pretty good here. I mean, if I'm looking at the results of the poll, we have about 77% of you either have updated data in your plan or are working towards it, which is actually really great. So let's talk about the best course of action then for updating your data. So again, a lot of you, if you have updated data in your plan, that's great. Maybe you need to consider doing some updates on your data. So what I want to talk about now then, so as we look at the Global Forum on Maintenance and Asset Management defines the management of change as the systematic approach to an organization's processes for the identification, assessment, implementation, and communication of changes to processes and assets. So that's a really, wordy definition, essentially to basically be able to know what you need to update, and how you're going to update it, and then document it. So in this case, as we talk about processes, right? So how are you going to update your data, as well as what you're going to update, right? So these are things that we need to consider along the way. So when we look at how do you actually go about updating your facility asset data, we are very specifically in this case talking about facility data. Is it just doing another FCA? And if so, are you going to use existing data as a start point for your upcoming FCAs, right? So some of the reasons why you might want to do this: do you need more accurate information to inform part of a capital project, right? Are you looking to do work in a building? Maybe your previous assessment is old, projects haven't been updated or reconciled in your data, like all the things that we've talked about previously. And before you get started on a capital project, you need to make sure that you know what's there and what needs to be done. Maybe you're requesting funding. Again, we all have sources where we request funding from. They need to, ensure that your data is accurate. So when you're requesting funding, people aren't questioning that. In a previous life, I worked in an organization where we had requested funding to do a capital project, and someone said, well, I thought you already did the windows. Why is it still in your data set? And it was still in there because nobody had ever completed the project in the software. So it was still showing as needing to be done, even though it had been done. So that actually kind of ties really nicely into my second point, which is reconciling your past work. So as you are, looking through your data set, is it going back to capture and making sure that all of the work that you've done in the past is captured in your data set? And at that point, again, it becomes a diminishing return on, do you spend a lot of time going through 5 years worth of projects to try and see what was done in a particular building or a set of buildings? Lindley alluded to scope creep on a project. So even though there might be a clearly defined set of needs for a particular capital project that you worked on, did other things happen along the way? And if so, were they documented? And how are you going to get that into your data set? So this is where we talk again about, do you just do another FCA to capture the new information from that renovation? Do you abandon your old data set and start over? Right. So again, I guess I kind of talked about that as well. Do you have a current capital project that's underway? So instead of trying to reconcile everything that happened during that capital project, do you just say, we'll wait till the capital project is complete and then either reassess the information, or do we just model that information from, architect's drawings and specs and plans and get an 80% accurate model for the first 5 years? Because really, if you're completing a major capital project, hopefully you're going to address a lot of the deferred capital renewal maintenance. So there won't be a lot of things to do over the next 3 to 5 years that you work through your planning process. So if you model everything out, that should get you through for a while. The other thing then is just doing a very thorough QA QC process on your existing data. So do you go through, like we identified with this client that I referred to, multiple recommendations associated with a single building component, building element, and go through and do that. Definitely that is the more labor intensive way, is to go through and look at everything that way and do it like that. But there are definitely different options for you. As we talk about, courses of action, we all know that, industry standard for condition assessments is every 3 to 5 years. The reason we talk about that, there's things that happen along that 3 to 5 year period, right? So we have degradation of actual building components, work that's been completed. So lots of things happen across that time period. You may have older buildings or heritage buildings that require more frequent assessments, maybe code changes or local bylaws, or, in this case, in Ontario, we've got the AODA regulations. So do you have all the data that you need to have to know where you are as far as meeting the requirements of AODA regulations in this case? Potentially you want to do an energy audit and look through your buildings to determine what energy savings could be had and incorporate that into your capital plans. So there's lots of reasons why you might want to go through and reassess your buildings on a cycle that isn't necessarily a 5-year cycle. But those are, again, would be determined sort of on a needs by needs basis. So as we talk about that, I will pass it back to Lindley.
Okay, thanks, Aidan. The pros and cons of your old data or using your old data. It's something important to consider. The pros of having your old data is you have the data already. It saves you money and time collecting new data. your old data is at your fingertips, really, or in filing cabinets, depending on how old your data is. But the existing data allows for analysis over time. So if you have your old data, you can do a linear comparison over time, which can be difficult when you are bringing in new data collection methods and new data. The cons of your data, it's important to consider that there's limitations of your old data. We've touched on them a lot today. Old data may not reflect current conditions, situations, or regulations. The quality, completeness, and accuracy of your old data may be uncertain. Maybe only one person knew all the information, and they've left the organization, and now you don't have any reliable information to go on. You may need to fully understand the data, its sources, and how it was collected. And again, just as I just said, that could have been some person that made a decision, as Aidan alluded, having the standards, writing down your processes. If you've changed costing, applied a greater replacement value so that there's consistency and knowledge transfer. So where did your data come from? Where did the condition assessment or condition ratings come from? There might be bias in your old data that you discover, and you need to filter the biases out. And lastly, duplication and project planning. So the same as before, you may have multi-years of planning, and if you haven't removed data or you haven't reconciled your data, it can cause problems with your planning showing up unexpectedly. Aidan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just say I think one of the other things that we should say is, as you are looking at your data, if you have old data, again, knowing that everyone here probably has to justify the reasons for spending money, especially right now. So showing that your data is old could help to show the need for conducting a new facility condition assessment, right? So being able to update that data somehow, if you look at your existing data and it's 10 years old, that might be a really good justification for doing some additional condition assessments, whether it's condition assessments or like I said, maybe even modeling some information, right?
What's also time, it's also the time that you may not have, or the personnel you may not have to reconcile that data, that you have to consider in using your old data versus FCA or modeling data.
Right. So I guess in summary, really what we want to talk about then is, you need to know what the data is that you have in front of you currently. Is it accurate? Where did it come from? How confident are you in the quality? As Lily talked about, there's different methods or versions of condition assessment. So was it a full condition assessment? Was it just a needs analysis? Was it model data? So know what it is that you have in front of you, and then once you know what it is in front of you, own your own data. So understand the value that data has. If it's high level model data, it can help you at a very high level, but it's probably not going to help you at a capital project level because it's not going to have enough detail. So know that and understand what it is and what value it has. And then from that, choose whether or not you can use it or you need to update it. There may be times where, that high level modeled data, whether it modeled or it's a, client informed model, might be enough for the current work that you're doing. But know that 2 years down the road, you're going to need more information than that's going to provide. So how are you then going to go about updating that information? Is it through a condition assessment? Is it through, reconciling projects? Is it just straight data entry? So really working through the different options that Lindley talked about to get your data reconciled. So I think with that, we've got some time here. We're a little ahead of schedule. That's okay. So we'll have some time for some questions. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, I will open it up to the floor. Don't be shy. So while you're all formulating your very concise questions, we do have on the screen here, so just a link to our website, as well as some contact information for myself, and a QR code there that you can scan for some more information about our thought leadership. No questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't know if there's a Q&A section. No. Okay. Well, I guess if there's no questions, we have a final survey that we would ask you to spend a couple minutes to fill in for us. And then we'll give everybody 20 minutes back in your day. Yeah, excuse me, not seeing any questions. So thank you everyone for attending our webinar today. We do have a whole series of other webinars available for you on a number of different topics. So again, feel free to go to our website. You'll see some links there to other webinars, and we would like to thank you all, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for listening.